Just give me one ping, any of you, just if you can hear properly. Give me a ping from one of the students, please. Then we can start. Okay, so we are starting with our session. So there are some requests from the students that I need to revise the last session's binding part. So again, we are starting with the binding of the data, right? So this is a form that you can see. Now the question was I need to bind my data in this form and show my complete data from the database into a table format. So to generate a table format, we'll go to Toolbox. I'm just zooming it for you. Right. So in this data, what you can do is you can go to data grid view and drag and drop here. Once this is done, we stretch this data grid view to some extent. Now to bind your data, what you will do is you will click on this arrow. Now in this arrow, you will see one option called choose data source. By default, the value is none. So I'll select that particular drop down and I will go to add project data source option. In this option, click this. So you will get one dialog box like this. In this, the first option is choose data source type. So I will select database and click on next. Next is what model you want to use. There are two models basically, data table and data set. But by default, this control supports only data set. So I will select this and click on next. Next is provide the data connection or connection string. By default, my connection string is the inbuilt application database. So I'm not changing this. You can check here. My database is webinar.mdf. So there is no issue with it. Then click on next. In this part, you need to provide the information of your data that you want to display in this particular data grid view. So it will first retrieve all the information that is available in our database and then it will display here. Right now we don't have any views, any procedures or any functions, but what we have is tables. And in that tables we have only one table that is called student. Now this is the option where you can select the number of columns that you want to display in your data grid view. Right now I want to select all, so I'm selecting all the columns, that means complete table, and click on finish. Let's wait for a few seconds. So automatically the columns have been generated by your data grid view. Choose data source option, and also it is allowing you three options: enable adding, enable editing, and enable deleting. So let us see. Right, so these are your options. And if you load this form, if you see is the code part, automatically the code has been written by your data grid view. It says that this dot student table adapter, that means this form actually. The form's backend contains one table adapter, that means it contains some data. And what you want to do is I need to fill that adapter with the webinar data set that contains student table. So if I execute this form, you will see the output. So here is your data, right? So now any queries with this particular control? Anyone? Yes, anyone? Any queries regarding this now? Fine. So moving on ahead, there was one question in the last session from I think Jeet, that how to redirect from one form to other form. So I'm showing you right now that one first. So I'm closing this. Coming back to design part, what I will do is I will create one button here. Let us say common controls, take one button, and I'm just renaming that button to redirect. Right. So what I want to do is right now I am in form 3, sorry, and I want to redirect to form 1 on clicking this button. Right. So I'm from form 3. I will redirect the complete control of application to form 1. So double click on this will create the click event of this button. Now here, what you need to do is you first need to create the object of that form to which you want to redirect. That means, let us say if I want to redirect to form 1, I will create an object of form 1 first. Say form 1 f1 equals to new form 1. Okay, and the next part is you just need to write f1, that is the object of the form that you want to redirect, where dot show. That's it. So what it will do, if I execute this form, if I click on this, see the form 1 has been opened. So there are many options: form1.open, form1.close, form1.show. You can use any options that you want. So this is how you redirect from one form to other form in this application. Is it clear? Shall we move ahead with the new topic now? Give me one ping. Okay. So moving on ahead, the next topic in our list is MDI forms. Now, what is MDI form? It is multiple document interface. Mainly, this MDI form is used to provide inheritance in Windows Form application mainly. Now, what is inheritance? In inheritance, we have one parent form and we have multiple child forms. So, what we say is whenever we are deploying any Windows Form application, we require one main form that will execute first, and it will contain all the forms within this form. That means the different forms that you want to open, that will be child forms of this multiple document interface, that is MDI form. So moving on ahead, MDI form or program's main window is called parent window and is mainly used to show various childs or windows forms in a single interface. Each window inside the app is referred to as a child window. So let us say my form or application is having 100 forms, and those 100 forms cannot be executed simultaneously using that program.cs file. So what I will do is I will create one MDI form first, and then I will bind all those forms in this MDI form. It means I will make all the forms, that those 100 forms, as a child of one MDI form, so that I can open all the forms simultaneously whenever and wherever required. Right? So MDI app can have many child forms and each has only one parent form. So remember that in a Windows Form application, there will be only one MDI form, only one MDI form, but it can have n number of child forms. Right? If we go move ahead, child windows cannot be parents. Yes, child windows cannot act as a parents. They need to be considered under one parent only. So you need to make the child for some parent. If a child behaves like a parent, then it cannot be given as a child form. A child Windows functionality can differ from one form to other form. Yes, exactly. That means each form can have different functionalities that can be bound to one single parent. That means, for example, one child is having some functionality of editing the image, other child is having some editing text functionality, and third is having some network traffic management like functionalities. So all of these child is having different functionalities, but they belong to only one single MDI parent form. So what are the different properties of MDI parent? See, the first property is MDI child. So this property will tell true or false whether that child form is MDI child or not. That means it does that particular form contains any parent or not. Second is MDI parent. So it will just provide you the name of the form that is the parent form of all the child forms. Similarly, you have active MDI child. That means which child form is executing right now. Is MDI container, is MDI children. Likewise, you have different properties of this particular MDI form. We are not going to deal with any of these properties in the code part except this MDI parent, because we need to specify that this child belongs to a particular parent. Now, how to write a code? This is the sample code that you can see in the PPT, which I already shared with you in your e-content. I'm moving on to code part right directly. So what I will do is I will come back to my Visual Studio. I will close all the forms right now. What I will do is I will go to Solution Explorer, right click, add new item, and select MDI parent form. Right? You can select MDI parent form. Let me change the name. Let us say not MDI parent but main form. Click add. So by default, MDI parent form has been generated by your Visual Studio. Now here your file contains new, open, save as, print, preview, exit options. Edit contains undo, redo, cut, copy, paste options. So these are the by default options provided by Microsoft and Visual Studio, right? So I am not concerned with these options. What I want is I want to create my own options here. That means I want to show all these forms that has been created by me, right? So what I will do is I will go to main. I will create one option here. To create the option, what you will do, you will go to this bar and just click here. On clicking here, you will get an option called type here. I'm just zooming it again, right? Here in this bar, you just click here and say whatever you want to. Let us say my forms is a heading. So my forms is a heading, and under this heading, I want to show my these three child forms, form 1, form 2, and form 3. So again, coming back to here, my forms, click here, say form 1, then I want to show form 2 and say form 3. So what I have done is I have created my own menu in which I have my forms tab, and under that I want to show three different forms. Till here clear everyone? Or is there any questions? Any questions from anyone? Okay, so moving on ahead. So now what I have to do is on clicking this form 1, it should open this form 1. On clicking this form 2, it should open form 2. And on clicking form 3, it should open form 3. So for that, I will just double click on this form 1 first. My forms ની અંદર જે form 1 લખેલું છે એના ઉપર double click કરશું. So double click on this. So it is creating one event called form 1 tool strip menu item click event. That means this is menu item and I'm clicking this particular form 1. Similarly, I'm double click on this, so it will generate form 2 click event, and I'll double click on this, it will generate form 3 click event. Right? Now what I have to do is if I click on form 1, I need to open form 1 of my application. So first thing, I will create the object. Form 1 F1 equals to new form 1. Next thing, what I will say is, sorry. Next thing, I need to share that to which particular MDI form this will be a child. That means I need to say that this form 1 is a child of some MDI form. So I will write like this: F1 dot MDI parent equals to this. Now what does this code mean? It means that this form 1 is a child of this MDI parent. That means it is a child of this MDI form. So code will be form 1 object dot MDI parent equals to this. And next will be F1 dot show. Similarly, I will write the same code for all the two other forms. Let us say I'll just change the form 3 and form 3, 2 and form 3. Right, so I have first created the object of a form. Afterwards, okay, again I'm showing you where to click. Let us go to design. I have created my option here. I want to display the three forms. So double click on this. So it will create this event. And then what we do is, whatever form I want to show, I will create the object of it. Then I will say that this form's MDI parent is this particular main form, and then I will just show that particular form. So if I execute this, oh sorry, by default form 3 is executing. So I need to change in program.cs. I will remove this form and I will write main because my form name is main here. Right, now execute this. So now my MDI form has opened. Right, this is the option that I have created. Right. Okay, Jit, MDI form is a multiple document interface. It is providing a inheritance for Windows Form application. That means you will have one child form, sorry, one parent form, and in that you can bind n number of child forms. Because if you execute normally your Windows Form application, you cannot execute multiple forms at one time. But if you want to execute multiple forms at a single time, you need to bind all these forms under one parent, and that parent form is known as MDI form. So my forms, if I click on this, I'm having three options. If I click on form 1, your form 1 is opened. Again, I go to my forms, click on form 2, form 2 is opened. And if I click on form 3, again the form 3 is opened. Right? So this is how the MDI form works actually. Now there are many options. Let's say, for example, if I open the second form, the first form should get closed. If I click on form 3, form 1 and form 2, both form must be closed. So that is all part the coding part. I am not going to discuss this thing in deep right now, because that you can learn it from Google also directly. So I'm closing this form again. Coming back to the code part, just revising the code part one more time. Go to design, create your own menu. Now whichever form you want to open, double click on that form. Then it will create one click event. Then you need to just create the object of the form that you want to display. Tell that this form belongs to the MDI parent of this, and then just show it. Right, so this is MDI form. Let us go to PPT again. If you see the PPT, the same thing has been implemented here. Let us say child form child. This is child form. Child equals to new child form, and then the child form has been given a parent and then a show method. So whatever we have done, the same thing is being written in your PPT. Now, important for your midsem or final examination, this question may be asked in 6 to 8 marks or maybe for 4 marks, right? So this is the only 3 PPTs that you need to refer for your final examination. There will be no program such in your final exam or midsem. Only the theory part of MDI will be asked in your examination. So you just need to refer these 3 PPT. Right? So what you need to do, you need to just explain MDI form. You need to write any two to three properties from this, and then you need to write one example showing that how the child form works under a parent. Clear? Yes, you need to click on a menu bar wherever you want to, and then you can just you can type your options. Yeah, any more queries regarding MDI form? No, you don't have to write anything in the exam as an output. You just need to write theory, 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 nothing else. Don't worry. Yes, exactly. You know, just need to go through theory. Any more questions, dear? Okay. So moving ahead now, moving on to the next topic, that is crystal reports. Now, crystal reports basically is the part of your unit number 7, that is ADO.NET. But I intentionally didn't cover that particular unit, this topic in that unit, because crystal reports are totally worthless if you don't know any Windows Phone application. So now we are going to study crystal reports, right? So what is crystal report? In general, whenever you are providing some application, right, the admin requires some types of reports at the end of the month or particular time limit. The admin wants to know some type of data, and that is why the admin needs to create or generate some reports. So reports that admin generates are in backend are the crystal reports. Now crystal report is a business intelligence used to design and generate reports from a wide range of data sources. In short, it is allowing you to generate some type of reports. Now let us say, for example, I am having one application, desktop or software application, that is managing the complete stock of a vendor or inventory. And now that stock management system is having four to five different modules. The first module is stock management. Now that module manages complete incoming and outgoing stocks. Incoming means raw materials, outgoing means the main products. The second module is the complete accounts. The third module is complete customers. Let us assuming three modules right now. Now, at the end of particular month, the owner of that software wants to know that how many products or how many raw materials was purchased in a month, how many products have been sold in a particular month. Then he also wants to know that how many new customers have joined in a particular month, total what amount of products have been purchased from outside world, and total what amount of products that I have sell in outside world. So I want to generate such reports. So at that time these crystal reports will be a much useful component for that admin, because these crystal reports provide built-in functionalities that helps a user to create or generate the reports with the click of one or two buttons only. There are not much backend coding. It is allowing a user to bind direct database with these crystal reports. So Crystal Reports is a built-in report design tool in a Visual Studio.net. It is fully integrated with Windows as well as web applications. Now, one more thing, students. The softwares that you installed in your system, maybe Visual Studio 2010, 15, 19, or any versions that you installed. One important thing is that these crystal reports won't be directly available in your toolbox. Remember this thing. What you need to do is you need to download SAP, SAP, SAP tool of Crystal Report to bind the Crystal Report control in your Visual Studio. SAP, I am again referring again that SAP control tool control you need to download from internet depending on your variant of Visual Studio, and then just install it, so automatically Crystal Reports tools will be available in your Visual Studio. Right now you won't be having those tool of Crystal Report in your Visual Studio. Now, what are the advantages of Crystal Report? The most major advantage is rapid report development. Yes, it is very easy to create reports using Crystal Report. As I said, just on a click of 2 to 3 buttons, automatically report will get generated. You can directly bind database to this report. You don't have to write much code to create the reports. Let us assume that in a PHP or HTML, you have been asked to generate report in a tabular format. So what you will do, you will either use for loop or for each loop, and you will create runtime table using table tag and TRTD tags. Nothing to do with this in this Crystal report. You can directly bind a database with your Crystal report and write 2 to 3 lines of code and the report will be ready. Second thing, can extend it to complicated reports with interactive charts. Yes, if you have some outside world softwares that create some different types of charts, so you can bind this crystal report with those charts graphically, and you can provide some summary or some bar charts or different number of charts that are available right now in this world, right? Next thing, can programmatically export the reports into widely used formats. You can convert these reports into these many formats: PDF, doc, Excel, HTML, and RTF, that is open source, right? So Crystal reports can be exported to any format you want and can be used in any way that a user wishes, right? So Crystal reports is a very intelligent business application, I would say. Moving on, next, types of Crystal reports. Mainly you have two types of Crystal reports. First is pull model. In this pull model, what we do is we connect to database, we use some parameters, we code that parameters, and then we generate the report. That means pull model is totally a programming type model. You need to create the complete program. You need to write the code for each and every steps, for each and every report parameter that you want to add in your report. That means, in short, it is a program. You need to write code for it. There is no direct method. And the second method is push method. The push method says that you don't program anything. You just create and call the connection of the database, and rest all the things will be managed by Crystal report itself. That means you don't write much code. You write 2 to 3 lines of code, and then rest of the things will be managed by your Crystal reports. So automatic version of Crystal report. So if I say differentiate pull model and push method, the first one is pure programming. The second one is pure automatic conversion or creation of Crystal report. But let me tell one thing here, that in a real world, we use the combination of push as well as pull model, because we cannot directly rely on any of these methods. We need to integrate both the methods while creating a successful and very interactive Crystal report. And to create this report, we follow these steps. Students, kindly go through these steps first. I'm giving you 4 to 5 minutes for this, so kindly go through these steps first. Then I'll go with the live demo. I'm providing you 5 minutes for this. You can go through all these steps. Right now it's 12:02. We'll again meet at 12:04, maybe. And if you have any questions regarding Crystal report, just raise it. Then we'll go for live demo. For MDI, it will be only question will be that explain MDI form in detail, either 4 marks or 8 marks. If it is midsem, only 6 marks. Yes, if the question is asked like that, explain Crystal reports. So what you need to do is you need to just define it. Then you need to write advantage. Then you need to explain the two methods, that is push and pull method. And then you just need to write these 6 steps displayed on your screen. Try to remember in short. No need to write all the steps, but just write down whatever things are important. So clear with these steps? Just go through it. You won't be able to know much things, but you just keep in mind what steps I have written here, so that you will come to know when I'm going for live demo. Okay, so moving on next. Shall I move on? Yes, 2 to 3, please ping me. Shall I move on? Okay, moving on. Moving on for the live demo of Crystal reports. So if I just go through the steps quickly, what it says that you need to create one data set, then you need to create some Crystal report, and then you have to add, sorry, yeah, then you have to add students. Now am I audible? Jit, I will be providing these details very soon. That which particular, okay, I will share the details of the weightage of each unit very soon with you. Okay, I think there is some connectivity issue. Just wait. Now is it clear? Okay, so shall we move on now? Okay, fine. Sorry for disturbance. So what I will do is, the first thing that I need to do is I need to create one data set. So I will go to webinar, that is the application, add new item. From the data, I will select data set, and let us say I rename it to Crystal data set. Say Crystal data set. Click on add. So the Crystal dataset.xsd file has been generated here, right? So now to create the data set, what I will do is I will right click on it and click on data table. Now here, first you need to rename this data table. Say, let us say it is student. Now I need to provide the columns. Okay, I'm just repeating the steps one more time. What you will do is you will go to Solution Explorer, right click on webinar, that is application, add new item, click on data, click on data set, and click on add. So this screen will appear. In that, what you need to do is right click on this screen and click on add data table. Once this is here, what you will do is you will first rename this data table. So I will rename it to student, let us say. Now I need to provide the list of columns that I want to display as a part of this data set. So I'll right click on this, add column. So first I will display data column 1, so I can rename it to ID, let us say. Now if I want to put this particular column, let us say add primary key. So I will add primary key to this particular column. So this column has been added as a primary key. Next, add a column, let us say enrollment. I'm just repeating all these columns, those that is a part of our table, this table, just for your reference. ID, enroll, then I'm adding a new column called name, add a column semester, add a column email, add a column mobile, add a column DOB, add a column gender. Right? So what I have done is, as I want to display the complete details of this table, I have created the same data set. Right? Now no need of this data set, close this. After closing this, again we move on to Solution Explorer. Right click on our application name, add new item. Now here what you will do is you will search for Crystal report. So you can see here Crystal reports. Let me rename this Crystal report. Let us say student report. The name is student report and click on add. So once you generate a Crystal report, you will have one Crystal reports gallery option. Now this gallery is providing you some options like what you want to do. You need to create a new report. You want to have one report from an existing report, or you want to have a blank report. But no, because I want to connect. Okay. So once my table has been closed, what I will do is just wait, student. My Visual Studio, yes, fine. I will go to Solution Explorer. I will go to Solution Explorer, right click on my application name, add new item. Now here, search for Crystal reports. Say rename it to whatever name you like. Let us say I'm writing stud report and click on add. Here you will have three options. Either you want to connect a database with your report, you want a blank report, or you want to add it from an existing report. So because I want to add a new database to my report, I will select this option and click on OK. So here you will have some options. Here what you need to do is you need to go to project data, click on add your data set. You don't need to install Crystal report right now because you will not have a practical question in your examination. So don't worry. Right, so click on this ADO data set, and then I have two data set in my application, but the recent one that we created is this Crystal data set. So select this and click on this double arrow. So it automatically will have a student data set that we created just before few minutes. Click on next. Now that student data set is containing these many columns. Now this crystal report is asking that which columns you need to display. Atul, you will not have crystal report in your Visual Studio, so don't worry regarding that thing. Here you are being asked that what columns you want to display in your report. Right now I want to show all the columns. I'll click on this double arrow. So it will be here. Next, if you want to group some of the columns, you can group. There is no need of grouping. So click on next. You can filter some particular columns based on some conditions. But right now we are not considering any filtration. Click on next. And here you are having different types of crystal reports that you can show to the user. But right now I'm using this standard option. So standard and click on finish. Wait for a few seconds, it will create the report. See, now the crystal report has been generated by your Visual Studio automatically. Now what it contains? The first section is report header. The report header mainly contains the title of the pages. Let us say I have a title of a company, the address, and many different things. So that is the report header. Second section is page header. Now what is page header? Page header will contain all the columns that has been given in a data set. The columns that you defined in your data set will be displayed here. The second section is, after that is details section. That means these detail sections will be bounded with this data set using some coding. Again, I am repeating, the detail sections will be bound using some coding with this data set. It means that all the relevant values of this ID, enrollment, name, semester, email, mobile, DOB, and gender will be fetched using some coding and will be provided here. Yes, exactly. The crystal reports can be used for generating bills. Good question, Harsh. Right, so I will use this coding part in the next phase. First, let us understand this report only. The next is report footer and page footer. These are the optional part. So let us say I'm using this report header part first. So right click in the report header part, insert text object. Let us say I'm giving some title. Let us say Marwadi University. Now if I want to change the font of this, I will select, right click and text formatting. Let us say I want to have bold italic. I need to 26 size and I want to show a red color. So here it is Marwadi University. Drag it as per the size. Right, so Marwadi University. Also, I want to show some more text here. So I will create one more text box. I will write list of enrolled students. Remember, students, I am using both the method, push as well as push. This too is a push method, and these are the pull methods. Right? Again, I want to display. I will show you how to bind the database. It is left. Shall I move on, Heli? Shall I move on, Heli? Okay, thank you. So, pull. One more thing I want to show in this report header is I want to print the date on which the report is getting generated. So what I will do is right click, insert special field, print date. So wherever you want to print, you just put this particular dialog. So here automatically this print date has been provided, right? So just I'm restructuring my particular report so that it can be viewed very properly. And let us say I'm creating one more text box object here. I will write this is computer generated report. This type of line you see many times in your e-bills. So yes, so my design and the layout of my report is ready now. So what I have to do is now I have to bind all these controls to with the database. So what I will do is I'm just restructuring my report. Don't worry, there is nothing else I'm doing right now. So my report design is ready. Now just what I need to do is I need to bind the database with these controls. So for that I will close this report. I will again go to Solution Explorer, right click on my application, add new item, and from the Windows form, select Windows form, create one new form. Let us say I am renaming this form to report.cs. Okay, I'll just show you Heli. Report.cs. So create one new Windows form actually, in short, right? Before moving to this code part, there is one question. So I'm just going to my report, stud report. Here, Heli, see, these controls were automatically being generated by your Crystal report. So this is called push method. And this control that we put manually, that means right click, insert, special field, print date, print time, whatsoever options you put. So these are the parameters that we put manually. That was not the part of Crystal report, that was created automatically. So what we did is we created this control or this component. So this is what we call it as pull method. Clear? Just provide me ping. Fine. So again, moving to the design part, I'm just closing this report now. So here in your Windows form, what you need to do is there will be no controls. We will just go to Toolbox and you will see one reporting tab here. In that reporting tab, there will be option called Crystal Report Viewer. Crystal Report Viewer, just drag and drop. So it will automatically create one GUI for you. And the name will be SAP Crystal Reports because it's the control of SAP. SAP, as I said in the few minutes back, that you need to install a new control from SAP. So it is a Crystal Report Viewer. Now the code part. In the code part, double click on form. So it will generate a load event of your form that you know. Now to use database, I will import two namespace, that is using system.data and system.data.sql client. I need to define one connection string. So string s equals to This is all repetitive, so I'm not discussing from where I'm getting all these things. Connection string, copy, paste. So connection string is of red color. Now, we are talking about this report load. And I'm also talking about binding of data from database to these fields, right? So in report CS, first thing I will do is string SEL equals to, I will write the query of select, that means what data you want to fetch and display in Crystal report. So select star from student, that is our database, not the data set. Create one data table, dt equals to new data table. SQL data adapter DA equals to new data SQL data adapter. Pass your query, comma connection, string, and da.fill dt. I think you remember all. You remember these steps. These steps I'm not repeating again. I have created a query that fetch the data from the database that you want to show in this report. Then execute that query and fill it in data table. So DT contains all the records of this student table. Now this records will be bounded to this report. So for that, what you will do is you will first write the name of your report. The name of the report is STUD report. So STUD report dot the stud report creates its object, say S1 equals to new student report. That is, I have first created the object of Crystal report. I am again repeating, I have created an object of Crystal report. The next task is I will write S1, that is the object of Crystal report, dot report dot set data source. That means what data you want to show in this Crystal report. Which data I want to show? I want to show the data of this data table. Right? So I want to show the data of this data table. So I will write DT here. Clear? So what is done? I have created the object of Crystal report. Then I have said that this Crystal report will have data source of this data table. And then the last part will be Crystal report viewer that we created in this form dot report source equals to S1. That's it. Fire the query of select, store the data in data table, create the object of, yeah, stored report. Sorry, I have let me change it. It will be stored report because I have created two reports for explanation by mistake. Fine. Stored report S1, and then you create the object of report. You set the data source of this, and then you said that Crystal report viewer will display this data source, this Crystal report. I will just solve that particular question answer query. Just wait for a few minutes, Heli, because already it's 12:30. Heli madam, sorry, Happy madam will be waiting for it. So I'll just show the output first, and we'll discuss the answer queries. Okay. Right. So our code part is over. So what I will do is I will go to program.cs and I will ask this form to execute. Can you hear now? Okay, so crystal report has been generated automatically here. Right, you can see the date parameter that we set, the name, the complete list of students is available here. Now you can structurize and design this report depending on the output as per your requirement. I am not going in the design of this part, right? So I am just clearly and I'm just quickly revising this code part. What I have done is I have created one connection string. I have defined that what to define the data to be displayed in this crystal report. I have used the select query. I have executed that and I have filled it in this data table. Then I have created creating the object of crystal report. Using that object, I am setting that which data source will be displayed in this crystal report, that is this data table. And then I am saying that this crystal report viewer in this form will be displaying this crystal report. That's it. Yeah, Heli, now just resolving your query that this is actually the combination of push and pull method, because push method will require this much code minimum. We need these 3 lines in push method as well as pull method. But in the pull method, there will be some coding depending on the requirements. There will be some external parameters that you want to set in the crystal reports. So all these things will be in the pull method, right? But we are not concerned with the pull or push method, and also we are not concerned with the practical aspects of crystal report. I have just given you a demo just so that you can know how the crystal report works. Only in exam you are concerned with these 3 PPTs that will be explain crystal reports in detail, right? Is this clear, guys? So you can go through the PPT that I already shared in your e-content under notes and symposium menu, right? And you can go through MDI form and crystal reports once again. If you still have any queries, you just raise it tomorrow, right? So now I am handing over this session to Happy Madam, right? Good day, guys. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Good afternoon. One more time, let's start with the compiler design. Am I audible, students? Okay. So let's start with the small revision. What we have already completed in our last session. Right. So I think no need to revise this part. Okay. We all are aware with that sessions, right? Now, okay, let's revise the code optimization technique. Okay, be ready with that. Okay, first one, let me explain the compilation methodologies, that is a folding methodology as well as the constant propagation. Okay, now this both are the, as we have discussed earlier, that this both methods are from the compile time evaluation method. Now, as the name suggests, compile time evaluation methodologies work at the compile time level, right? No need to replace the code at the runtime. So before the running process, we can easily compile our code as well as run our code, right? At the compile time. Why? Because if we were used a folding method and the constant propagation method, our code is something like A is equals to 22/7 and multiplied with some U. That means we can easily, at the runtime, we can easily divide 22/7 as 3.14. Why? Because when our compiler used a folding methodology, at that time your compiler can directly divide your 22/7 with and replace with the 3.14, and your running process will be easily started. Okay. Now, what is the constant propagation method? Now, in a constant propagation method, as we have discussed earlier, that constant propagation method replace the constant value with the your variable name. Like if I have pi multiplied with I as well as the constant value for pi equals to 3.14 and the ith value is something like 9, right? So at the constant propagation method, our value replaced with 3.14 multiplied with 9 and multiplied with 9. Okay, so this is the sequence, or this is the sentence which your compiler form at the compilation time when your compiler use the constant propagation optimization methodology. Okay, now, okay, the question for the audience or maybe for the students, that for the given code you just need to identify the optimization method, or give me the name of optimization method. Okay, now the example is something like 3 address code, right? So I guess you all are aware with the very well explained that what is 3 address code and all these things in your previous sessions, right? So T1 equals to A multiplied with 9, T2 is equals to B plus 8, T3 is equals to D plus U, T4 is equals to B plus 8, T5 is equals to I multiplied with U, and T6 Z equals to T. Okay, just give me the name of optimization method. Okay. Check this, we already done it. Constant propagation, no. Give the list of optimization methodologies. Okay, out of this you need to give me the answer of for the following question. Okay, okay, just give me the name. Sub expression repetition, Heli, good going. Is she right or not? Common sub expression, yes. Hussein, good. Algebraic, no. Harsh. Okay, yes. Nisha, this is the common sub expression elimination methodology. How can you identify that T2 as well as T4, both the sentence are same, as well as there is no any operation with the T2 as well as my T4, right? So if I'll eliminate my T4 equals to B plus 8, then it can easily work, right? Because these two methodologies work as the C. I don't want to use any other operation with the B as well as any other operation with the 2 or 2, you can say T4, right? If I have a code something like T4 is equals to T2 plus 7, and then I have one more code something like T6 is equals to B plus 8, right? Still I can remove my T6. Why? Because there is no any operation with the B as well as 8. Yes, here I am just changing the value of T2 with the 7. Okay, I think all are clear with the methodology. Okay, yes, is there any question? Okay, let's move to the second question. Okay, second example. Let's use one more example, that is for one more methodology. X is equals to 10, then if my x is equal 0, then you just need to print hello. Right. So now just give me the name of a given example. Okay, this is the list for you. Okay, one answer that is correct. So if we want a code something like this, then at that time you can delete this code. Okay, okay, very good. Akshay, dead code elimination, yes, good. Okay, so I think there is no any problem in our optimization method, right? Let's move further. Okay, compiled emulation, we already discussed. Common sub expression, we already discussed. Copy propagation, we already discussed. Code motion, okay. So what is code motion methodology? This is also revision type of thing, okay? That some irrelevant sentences, there is no any effect in our for loop. That type of sentence we can move out of the loop. Okay, reduction in strength. Yes. So the higher strength operator may be replaced with a lower strength. Why? Because to increase the efficiency of our code. Right? Now this is the example of date code elimination. Okay. Now there is one more technique with the code optimization, that is algebraic simplification. Okay, now what is algebraic simplification? Okay, so we all are aware with some code, that is if I have one variable that is c, and if I want to plus with 0 the value of c, then there is no any meaning of this algebraic sentence, right? Now same as like that, if I have one value a equals to 8, and if I'll multiply my a variable with 1, then there is no any effect in my compiler or in my code with this given sentence. So if I want to remove this line, your compiler can easily remove this type of sentence. Why? Because this is the algebraic simplification, right? Now if I want to simplify this sentence, c equals to 5 8 and c plus 0, then the answer is always my c variable, right? So our compiler identified this type of algebraic sentences and rules. Using that rule, they can easily remove that type of code. Okay. So for the addition purpose, if we have add our value with the 0, that can remove that type of sentences. If I want to minus my value with 0, then that can also remove that type of code. Now if I want to multiply with 1, then also this there is no any meaning of this type of sentence. Now if I want a divide with the 1, then there is also a no need of this type of, right? So our compiler identified that type of algebraic sentences, and if they find out this type of sentences, they can easily remove that type of sentences from the code, right? So we can see over here that a multiplied with 1 equals to a divide 1, a multiplied with 0, a, this, okay. Now this type of code, okay. Now the second, okay. So our all methodologies are completed over here with the code optimization technique, right? Now we will start with the one more new concept, that is a loop optimization, right? Now what is loop optimization methodology? Okay. So in a loop optimization methodology, we have a major two techniques, that is loop invariant detection and the loop unrolling. Now before we start with the technique, why we require that loop optimization? So whenever we compile our code, if there is any loop, then our 90% of execution time will be spent in our loop optimization or in our the loop execution purpose, right? And a 10% time will be spent in our actual code. Why? Because if I want to print 50 times hello in my code, then I'll write some for loop that it will repeat 50 times, and every time it will print the hello on my screen. Okay, so uh, this is the only for one printing the hello. But if I have 100 variables and I want to repeat my loop 50 times, at that time what will happen? Our time, major time is taken by our for loop, or we can say that do while loop. Why? Because 100 variables initialized at a time, 100 values stored in the our symbol table, 100 new memory locations will be required for that purpose. Now, if we decrease the time of our compilation process using the loop optimization, then it will very much beneficial for our code, or very much beneficial for our compiler as well. So the a large P of to optimize the code within a loop. Okay, we have discussed it. Okay, now loop invariant detection. Okay, so same example. The sentences which is not relevant with your for loop, we can easily moved out of the loop, right? So the same method as we are discussed in our code motion, right? It is same like code motion. We can move our sentence out of the for loop. Why? Because if my n is equals to 100, then a equals to t multiplied by 10, 100 times it will compile, or 100 times it will run. So the time is a major concern over here, that 100 times are a and 100 times are t, right? So total 200 times we need to identify our code, as well as 200 times our compiler need to store in our symbol table, as well as give the memory to that variable, as well as if we will use a pointer or something else, then we just need to do that type of things, that initialize one pointer, it will point to your symbol table, your values, as well as your variable, right? So that type of time we need to reduce in using this loop invariant detection method. Okay. Now the second one, that is a loop unrolling. Now what is a loop unrolling? Just decrease the iterations of your for loop. Now how can you replace, or how can you reduce the iterations of your for loop? So as you can see in your screen, that one for loop starting with the 1 and up to 10,000, it will incremented with 1, right? Now it will give the result something like b of I plus c of I and stored into the a of I, right? So it is something like our array initialization or array addition, something like that. Okay. Now, so instead of this, if I do something like my loop ith variable always starting with the 1 up to 9,999 times. Why? Because now I am increment my loop with the 2. Right? So jump is always with the 2 initialization. If we'll start with the 1, then second jump with the 3, then third time our loop running for the 5th time, and then 4th time my for loop running with the 7th time. Okay, so but instead of this, I'll replace my code something like I plus 1 plus C is equals to I plus 1, right? So, okay, is there any doubt? Okay, can't we do increment by 3, 4 or more instead of 2? Why just 2? Okay, I'll just take example with the 2. If you want, you can increment with 3. But if you want to increment with 3, then you just need to add one more sentence over here, that A is equals to I plus 2 equals to B plus I plus 2 plus C plus I plus 2, something like this. Or maybe you can do something like A of I plus 1, A of I plus 1 is equals to B plus Heli. Right now I'm okay. You got it? Okay. Just till I just complete this question. Plus, sorry. Okay. One more time. Try down the A of I plus 1. So in that case, you can jump with the 3 or 4 or maybe more than that type of thing. Okay. So my for loop will only run at the 5,000 time. Okay. Over here, my for loop will increment or my for loop run 10,000 times. But if I'm using a loop unrolling method, then my for loop will run only for the 5,000 times. Okay, not more than that. Yes. Okay. I think everyone, am I clear with this? Is there any question? Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay. Now the one more method, that is a peephole optimization method. Okay. So up till now, those methodologies we were already covered in our session, that all methodologies are something like this type of techniques. Okay. Now we have one more method, that is peephole optimization methodology. Now what is a peephole optimization method? Peephole optimization is something, or you can say a short of sequence or short of a program which will run at the compile time, as well as it can decrease the time efficiency, right? As a place of 10,000 time, it can be decreased with the 5,000, something like this, right? So it is a short sequence of a target instruction that may be replaced by a shorter or a faster sequence, or you can say a scrolling window type of thing, that which will every time scroll with some value or with scroll with some instruction, right? Which can directly affect to our compilation time process. Okay, so we can, okay, so can we say peephole includes all other optimization techniques? Yes, exactly. We have some techniques with the peephole optimization, that is this, the characteristics of peephole optimization, that using this 5 methodologies you can directly reduce the code. If we want to use a redundant instruction elimination, at that time if you want to control your flow, then you can also do that type of things in a same program, right? So instead of one technique, you can use more than one technique in a same program using a peephole optimization technology, peephole optimization characteristics. So let's start with the redundant instruction elimination. Okay, now what is redundant elimination? It is, can I say that it is same like your common sub-expression elimination methodologies, right? But here we don't have any common sub-expression elimination. Why? Because at the time of our assembly level language code, we can move something like R0, A as well as MOV A, R0. Okay. So what is the meaning of this? The value of A is something like 5. We'll store into the register R0. Then the value of register R0 will be next time will move in the A variable. So instead of this, if we can delete this type of code using the peephole optimization, then we can say that we used a redundant loads and stores optimization of peephole optimization characteristics. Okay. Am I clear with the first methodology? Now let's go to the second. That is an unreachable code elimination. Now what is unreachable code? Sometimes we'll write that type of code that a compiler never visit, it will never going to visit that type of part, or you can say that that type of part never going to be executed using by our compiler as well as our loop or as well as our function too, right? Why? Because sometimes intentionally or maybe unintentionally will write something like this. If first of all, okay, go with this part. Okay, so example number 1, that integer add method, we have two variable, integer x comma integer y. Okay, so in this code, integer z equals to x multiplied by y, and I'll return x plus y. Now why the z equals to x multiplied by y? It is a dead code, right? Why? Because we discussed earlier that dead code means your compiler never going to visit that type of code. As well as the second part, why are integer, if I'll replace, if why this is dead code, because I never use the value of z, as well as I'll never going to use the multiplication of x multiplied by y. Why? Because for this function I'll return the value of x plus y only, so there is no any work of my z variable, right? So this is dead code. There is no any excess of z variable also in my program, right? So this type of sentences are known as the dead code. Now the second part on the right hand side, that integer add integer x comma y, just I swap the two sentences with each other, that I'll first write return x plus y. When our function will return some values to your function, then it will never going to visit the next line of your after of your return statement. So you can say that integer z equals to x multiplied by y never going to reach by your compiler. Okay, so if once I'll return some value from my function, you can say the flow of your function is in the is going to be handed over by the next process, or you can never reach the next line after the return statement. Okay, so this is the major difference between unreachable code and the dead code. Okay, so let's explain with one more example, that I equals to 9 comma k equals to 7. Now 4, okay, let's do the if my I is greater than 7, and the else part, and that code is not, there is one question that dead code is not needed while unreachable is not executed. Yes, you can see that. Okay. So for this example, just let me answer that which part is a dead on, chalo, which part is unreachable code. Okay, give me the answer. Everyone, those who are active, just give me the answer. That how can you identify the unreachable code out of this given example? Okay, K is lose unreachable part. S part is not going to be executed. Yes, Nishant. Okay. Okay. So up till now, I think I'm clear with the all points. Okay. So let's move further with the next processes. Okay. So the third characteristic is flow of control optimization. Now, what is a flow of control optimization? Okay, sometimes we will write some code, something like function 1 can call function 2, then function 3 can also call the function 2 without using or without going to operate anything, just we will call one and another functions by at a time, right? So that type of flow is not necessary or not required in our program. So instead of that, you can directly go with that part only, whichever is all, which is the most needed in our section, right? So that type of unconditional jumps or unnecessary jumps in my code, then that type of flow can be deleted or eliminated by our compiler. So let's explain with some example that go to L1. Some code is there. Now L1 is go to L2. So instead of go to L1, if I directly go to the L2, then I can directly reach with my output efficient code. Why? Because unnecessary jump that will eliminate the either the intermediate code or the by the target code. So before going with the a whole major jump and one more another jump will directly reach the targeted code. Okay, so that type of flow is unnecessary in my compiler. That type of code we can directly eliminate it by our compiler. Okay, so jump to conditional jump and again conditional jump to unconditional jump is it is not necessary every time. Okay, so that type of code may be eliminated by our compiler. So the fourth methodology, that is algebraic simplification. Okay, so this methodology we already discussed in our previous session. No, in this same session, but before more. Okay, only a few algebraic identities occurs frequently. Okay, so I think you don't have any doubt in this. Okay, reduction in strength we already seen in the the reduction in strength replaces expensive operators. Okay, so as we were discussed that the higher strength variables may be replaced with the lower strength variable in our code. That type of code can identified by our compiler. Then this type characteristics or methodology can known as reduction in strength. Okay, so in peephole optimization methodology, is there any doubt? Anyone? Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes. If you have any doubt, you can ask me. The characteristics of peephole optimization. What is peephole optimization? The methodologies or characteristics of peephole optimization. Okay, is there any doubt? Okay, explain number 4, please. Okay. Use of machine items. Okay. Yes, 6. Yeah. I'll come with this. I know up till 5. Is there any doubt? Okay, we will remaining with the machine items. I know that. Nishan, how will the question supposed to be in exam of peephole? Okay, explain peephole. What is peephole? And explain the characteristics of peephole optimization with the small example. Okay, Nishant, am I clear? Okay, I'll explain machine items. We are remaining with this, I know that. Okay, Nishant. Okay, good. Now, what is the machine items? Okay, machine items is something like the ready to use. The ready to use instruction. Okay. So I think you all are aware with the one CAD CAM, right? The mechanical part software, that is CAD CAM software, right? So whenever you want to code in that type of machines, you just need to go with something like every time you just need to you just need to insert your machine that go with the next part, in increment with one, increment with one, right? So instead of that, if your machine will give you a inbuilt code that if you will complete with the one sentence, machine will directly increment it by itself. If you write one more sentence, machine will directly increment it with one. Something, a concept called auto increment or decrement addressing mode, right? In build machines, right? Right now we have machines that can automatically, or you can say that can directly incremented with one or directly decremented with one. Inbuilt something, we can say that inbuilt functionalities, right? So instead of going with that type of addressings, that right, that I equals to I plus 1 every time, instead of this, you can just use that machine inbuilt functionalities, right? You just need to add your code, no need to increment it with one, no need to decrement it with one. Why? Because the machine knows that if you are completed with the first sentence, it will automatically increment it with one, right? So in that case, you just need to use a machine items which is ready to use. Okay, so the use of these modes greatly improves the quality of code. So lines of your code may be decreased, efficiency of code may be increased, time efficiently as well as space efficiently, right? So now am I clear with the machine items characteristic? Okay, I plus plus or I equals to I plus 1, which is cheaper. Okay, it is the inbuilt functionality. So just machine needs to identify that which one is beneficial for me. We don't want to going to write that I plus plus or maybe I equals to I plus 1. Why? Because it is already there in your machine. You just need to go with your code only. No need to increment the addressing mode, no need to decrement the addressing mode. Okay. Am I clear? Hilly? Hello? Am I audible? Okay, yes. Okay. So, shall we move further with the next part? That is loops in a flow graph. Okay. Now, what is a loop optimization? We all are aware with that. Okay, yes or no? Okay, hello. Am I audible? Yeah, audible. Okay. So which loop can call one more loop, which function can call one more function, that type of flow can be decided before going to run with the program, right? At the compile level, our compiler can identify that how your control or how your loop going to be executed at the runtime. So instead of the runtime, if they know how our control can going to flow with the one flow to the another flow or one loop to the another loop, right? At that time, at the compile time, you can say that it is optimized by your compiler, right? So some methodologies known as a dominating loop, known as the natural loop, and known as the reducible loop or inner loop methodology, you can control the flow of your loop. Okay, so the first method, which is comes under the loops in a flow graph, we'll start with the that section. Okay, so the how your flow is going to be graphed whenever your control of. Okay, is there any question? Okay, yeah, no any question. Okay. So the first methodology, that is, how can you identify that which one is a dominator in your loop? So we have one method that we can identify the we can identify the dominators. That node D of a flow graph dominates a node N, then we can write that D dom N. That we can say that D dominates the loop, or you can say the node N in my given loop. Now, if your every path from the initial node of the flow graph to N goes through the D, so what is the meaning of the second line? Now, the initial node is the one, right? Why? Because we'll start with the one. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are my node. Okay, in my one loop. Okay. So we can say that through my D, I can start with the 1, and through my old node, I can reach up to the 5. Okay, so the node 1 is initializing node, as well as the every node dominates by the 1. Okay, now if we'll say that node 2, right? So node 2 dominates the node number 3, node number 4, as well as node number 5, right? And 1 is the dominates for every node 2, 3, 4, and 5. Yes, am I clear with the dominators? So right now we are just clear our concept that what is dominators, what is inner loop, what is natural loop, that type of concepts. And we will use that type of concepts in our control flow analysis, or we can say basic block analysis, that we are discussed in our next sessions. Okay, don't worry. Now the second one, what is a natural loop? Okay. So our initial node is 1, right? In the given example, our initial node is 1. As well as we can say my 1 number node is always entry point of my loop, so that we can say that node number 1 is the header of my loop, header of my given loop, right? So it would not be the sole entry in the loop. Why? Because if my 1 is the sole entry, then we cannot say that the 1 is a dominator of all loops. If there is no any loop in my given question, then there is no any meaning of the header node, or there is no any meaning of the natural loop concept or dominating loop concept, right? So the first and foremost thing for the natural loop is this entry of, or this entry means the header entry. The header entry point dominates all nodes in the loop. Yes, our first point is fulfilled over here. Or it would not be the sole entry. Yes, my one is not would be not going to would be the first sole entry, right? And the second point, there must be at least one way to iterate the loop. Okay, that means what? There must be one path from which I can directly reach up to the header node. That is known as a natural loop, right? So the node number 5 going to the first number node at the last point. Okay. So the one path back to the header. Can I say that the one path back to the header, that is known as the natural loop? Instruction 2. Is there any question? Okay. Students, is there any question with the natural loop as well as the dominators of your loop? Or should I go with the next slide? Hello students, am I audible? Okay, should I go with the next PPT? Okay, let's go with the next slide. Okay, now what is the inner loop concept? Okay, as we have discussed, or we all are aware with that, a loop inside one more loop, that is known as the inner loop concept. Okay, now in the given example, if I'll say that B0 passes the flow to B1, B1 passes the flow to B2 as well as B3. So we can say that if there is a if condition in my block B1, then there is a concept if is true, then going to the B2, and if it is wrong, then going to the B3 part, right? Something like this. Okay. So the inner loop concept like something, B0 is the first my header part, as well as B1 goes to the second B1, B0 to the B1 and B1 to the B2, as B2 is going to in the first header part at the last part at the last point. Okay, so the inner loop is B0 B1 B2 as well as B0 B1 B3 in the given example. Yes. Okay, yes or no? Yes. Okay. Now the last concept for a loops in a flow graph, that is inner pre-header loop. Okay, now what is the known as a pre-header? Okay, header before our actual header is known as the pre-header. And why we require pre-header in our example? Because some part that is not needed in my loop, we can directly neglect that part or eliminate that part from the loop and will write it out of the loop. So we can say that our pre-header is something, a concept like loop invariant methodology. Okay, so it is same like loop invariant. You can say the code motion as well. Okay, some statements are required to move before the header. So that type of sentences or that type of block can known as the pre-header for our given header. Okay, it is only a successor, right? We cannot enter without any pre-header, right? If we reach to the header part, we must have to first reach up to the pre-header, then header, and then the loop. Okay, so before the pre-header part, we have a header and a loop, and after optimized our code from the loops in a flow graph, we can say that pre-header, header, and a loop. Okay, yes. Okay, up till now, is there any question? Okay, let's one more time revise our today's session. I'll summarize and then we'll start with the session. Okay. Okay, so the redundant instruction, elimination, flow of control, these all methodologies are, or these all techniques are okay in machine items. Kelly, is there any question? It's written that selecting addressing modes improves, so we need to choose out of some instruction that which is cheaper if it comes to selection. Okay, it will give you the optimized code, okay, or a ready code which you just going to use that instruction. Okay, there is no any instruction something like I plus plus and I equals to I plus 1. You just need to go with your code section part and just do not write any incremented part or decremented section in your code. Why? Because it is directly incremented with one which is already there in your machine. Okay, so you not going to just write that type of sentences via addressing mode. Okay, so you just write down your code only. It is only dependent on your machines, right? Machine to machine it may be vary. Okay. Okay. So just give me the answer that what is peak hole optimization? What is peak hole optimization? Write down the answer in the question part only. Okay, everyone, write down the answer. What is peak hole optimization? Okay, you just give me the answer of what is peak hole optimization. To create shorthand of our code by using a several optimization technique. Okay, good, Helly. Okay. Okay. So there is unreachable code, flow of control, algebraic simplification, reduction in strength, use of machine items, loops in a flow graph. With the dominators, what is natural loops, what is inner loops, and what is pre-header. Okay. So we'll continue with the global data flow analysis in our next session. We'll inform you later. Stay at your home, stay safe. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Madam, you are done?
Hello.
Madam, you are done with the session?
Hello.
Happy, ma'am? Happy, ma'am?
Yes, sir. I am audible.
Okay, students, we are closing the session for the day. Stay safe, stay home. Goodbye.